Welcome back, everyone. You're watching We Heart Therapy, the special series EFT Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Belle, aka Anabelle Bugatti, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified EFT supervisor and therapist here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. And if you guys haven't had a chance to come out to Vegas and attend one of our amazing trainings, I help lead the Southern Nevada EFT community for EFT, and we're doing trainings all the time, and we would love to have you come be a part. And if you haven't gotten your copy of my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, you can find it on Amazon. I was so blessed to have Dr. Sue Johnson endorse my book. It was so amazing. And it's really a self of the therapist book to help you work with your most challenging and difficult clients. And it's an easy read. And I hope that you guys enjoy it and that you grab your copy on Amazon. And hey, well, I'm super excited today because if you're watching the video form of this, at least, you might already recognize this beautiful lady here that's our guest today. This is Dr. Simona Herb. She is the EFT trainer and founder of the Romanian Center for EFT in Romania. And she's a therapist out there in Romania. She leads the community and she's been doing all kinds of amazing things. And in Romania, of all places. So every time I get to see Simona, I'm asking her all kinds of cool questions about Romania and, of course, Transylvania, because, who doesn't love a good stereotype? And actually, Simona is the one who got me certified as an EFT supervisor. So she's really amazing and just doing some amazing things out there in her community. So we're excited to have her back. Welcome, Dr. Simona.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation. Yeah,
Awesome.
glad
So
to be
what are we,
together.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about systems and how to think systemically. And so, Simone, if you can kind of start us off, when we say systems or thinking systemically, what on earth do we mean when we're saying that?
Yeah. So my first training was in system therapy, and actually EFT has a lot of systemic thinking included. So that's cool, right? I mean, just when we say cycle, that is already systemic, right? We are very used about cycle pattern, but sometimes we don't know that actually it's a systemic thinking. So when we think about systems, it's like we thinking everything and everybody lives in a system that is not alone and has many elements around. And especially when you talk about family, for sure it's a system. Every element will be influenced by the other elements. It's a movement. That means the system. We don't believe even in EFT in the independency. We believe autonomy, but not independent. So in the
Mm,
system, it's kind of this thinking. So when we look to an element, actually, we want to take care of what was this element influenced by. So we
mm,
look to the system. That means we have subsystems. So like a family, this is a system, but we have the subsystem of parents and children. So, and there is
And
always a
environment and context are part of that
yes,
system.
yeah, that's the outside, right? So we are always influenced.
Mhm.
So actually, when we talk about systemic thinking, when even an individual comes to therapy, we don't take it as an individual. Of course, we want to ask what is the pain, how can I help? But when the story begins and let's say the development of the problem, I want to know in which context, in which system, what influences this problem. And this is I would say more complex and in the same time more real thinking just about individual, right?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And I'm thinking about the therapists who might be listening to this who aren't trained in systems theory and might be thinking like, what is this? I don't know. What I hear you saying really is that the system is made up of parts that are all interrelated and always influencing each other. And that when what society means by autonomy, and they use that word independent, it really what the society means is isolation. They're thinking if you isolate one part of the system, or a part, that you should be able to impact that part, and somehow whatever happens to that piece happens in isolation of the system and isn't influenced by the system or has no influence on the system. And you don't have to look very far, even in nature, to see systemic science around us and evidence of it. I mean, the whole universe, the food chain, even our society. Shout out to Dr. Ryan Reyna in Arkansas, the EFT trainer out there. He always talks about, even like he said, there's the myth of independence is even if you go to the gas station, right, and you're putting gas in your car, somebody had to put the gas into the gas pump. There has to be a cashier, or somebody who runs the ATM machines. And, so we're never doing things in isolation of each other. That, even if our parts don't interact very much in a broader system, we're all still doing something that is a part of a system that almost like a domino effect or a ripple effect touches another part of the system, which touches another part of the system. And I love what you said. So even if an individual comes in, you're saying like, and I think you're probably thinking of what Sue says, is even when an individual comes in for therapy, they're never coming alone. There's that cast of characters they're interacting with, which is true. Even if it's how do I get over my ex who hurt me really bad, or how do I deal with a parent who seems kind of toxic, or how do I ask my boss for a raise, or why do I keep finding bad relationships? Like there's, nothing is in isolation of other human beings.
Right. I mean, Rogers as well says when we meet a client, actually we meet all the family, even if the client comes alone. Because when a client, asks for individual therapy, actually we find a world with almost all the ancestors, like all the attitudes, all the value, everything what happened in childhood. When we do systemic, we do a lot of transgenerational analysis, like, how did you learn this? Who taught you this? Who did this before? And, suddenly the client says, oh, I think all my females in all my, generational tree did that, didn't believe in divorce, even if the relationship was not good. Now I see, right?
Mm.
So, uh, I I think this is the most important. We can't look to an individual like an isolated person, even if in that moment feels like he or she is isolated. She has inside, this person has inside the influence of many, many generations, and as well the system in the present and the, bigger system outside. Cannot be,
Yeah.
yeah,
And they're feeling impacted by the system outside.
right.
And I
Yeah.
love kind of like what I think the heart of what you're saying in therapy really is that the system gives context, right? Even if a person comes in for individual therapy, so let's say it's just like one person coming in as a customer for change, doesn't mean that we're still not working with a system in some way. Just quick case example, I have clients across all kinds of professions, and I'm just going to pick a generic example to not identify my client, but I have a client who works, in the beauty industry, and those kinds of estheticians, beauticians, hairstylists, manicurists, they all work in salons. And though this person's coming for individual work, there's a lot of distress around the system at work that leaves them feeling like they don't belong, like they're excluded, and it just feels like a really toxic work environment, and leads to great distress and then affects clients' quality of work. So again, um, when a client comes to therapy and we try to treat them, you know, not considering the context, maybe our work might not be as effective in helping to create change.
Absolutely. I would agree 100% because system means as well culture, diversity. We really need to understand this person holistic. Not just, a pain is not the same with another pain. And, when a person says, I don't know, I have conflicts with my parents, a teenager, if we think very general and we don't the full system, we could be wrong. Because in a culture, having problems when you are a teen with the parents is very normalized. Like you're normal teen, like of course you don't like your parents for a while, but in other culture is unacceptable. And that will, the system will put a lot of pressure on the, young adult to belong, to obey, right?
To
It is
honor,
important
respect.
to honor. So we really, of course, our core intervention is on attachment, and we know that. But even attachment history, when we do, tells us things about system, but we really need to know everything, all the context, all the system that is involved our client to really understand. Because when we speak about attunement and really getting the client, kind of I really need to go there in his system to see
Mm,
how is it to
mm,
belong there in that culture. Like we have a lot of um, gypsies that are very discriminated in Romania,
mm, mhm,
right? And if you don't ask, you don't know.
mm,
This is when you ask, there is another world that opens up, which is system, culture, generations. Yeah. And
mm.
it's beautiful work, I would say.
Yeah. And, just quickly, a little side note, what you said about gypsies is I don't think it's just in Romania. And I know, there's a catty talk even in North American culture about gypsies. And even historically, I think they have always sort of been discriminated against. And that really stinks. So, but anyway, coming back to the point, it's just a really interesting factor that there's a high gypsy population in Romania, which is kind of neat. So, talking about the system, so I think another part of what you're kind of circling around here, Simona, if I'm understanding you right, is sort of like thinking about causality. And there are some systems theory terms that come up here, like linear causality versus circular causality. And would you like to talk more about those and how they're different?
So we are used more with the cycle, which is a circular causality. And I would say that this is the most important. Linear is just cause effect and kind of it's not systemic. It's like I shouted you because you are bad,
Mm,
which is very limited to understand exactly the relationship, because in system we look to relationship, especially I like to work with systems and think about in family therapy, because family is, you can't, I would say, work in family without seeing the systems, subsystems. So it's very simplistic. If we look to linear causality, then we can be prone to resolve one part, because one part could look like is the cause of the other part reaction. So
yeah.
we could be tempted in
Mhm.
fixing one part, right?
I
Because
think that's where blame comes up, where people
yeah,
often get stuck is I like your example. I got angry because you were bad, but then the other part of that system could turn and fight back and say, well, I was only bad because you were angry or grumpy, and then they go back and forth and get stuck there, which we often see.
this is the block, right? The stuck. When we have linear thinking, who is bad, who is guilty. Of course, this is an endless cycle that they are in about finding the bad guy and who should fix the behavior. When we start to think circular, it's the cycle, right? Like it's so something happens to me, I have like a trigger or a signal that makes sense in my attachment and in my system. Like, what does this mean if my parent doesn't let me go out as the other children, let's say? Because you see, it's another system that puts pressure for a teen, which is the group system. I'm
Mm,
from a group. Everybody goes out. I'm not allowed. So this kind of troubles me and starts inside of a lot of worry or frustration. And I want to kind of go to my dad and say that, but I'm not used with saying it very freely. So I say it like a protest or doing something bad, and that triggers my father.
mm,
And he will get worried. Uh-oh, what's going on with my daughter? She's not on the good path. And then he will be more strict, actually, more controlling, which will cause more frustration and so on and so forth. So when we talk about cycle or circular thinking, we think about this endless root loop, let's say, that they are in and they can't stop it, right? Yeah,
mhm,
exactly. That's exactly, it's there. And actually, I like how it is with the heart because sometimes it blocks or chains the heart when
mhm,
it's endless because they are both parts and sometimes they are system, the subsystem of children with the subsystem of parents that feel helpless and so they need to have more and more control. And unfortunately, it blocks the caregiving system, which is very important for the parent. Instead of being there and giving care, I'm always triggered and I try to take control, which this will trigger my children to feel, unloved, unheard, uncared.
mm.
So it's more complex and it's more realistic than cause effect, right?
Yeah, and I think it's less pathological, but also what sort of occurred to me as you were saying this was sort of two different ways that people can feel stuck is that, people can get stuck not recognizing the system and how they influence each other. And the other way is maybe feeling stuck in a system where they recognize all how the parts are interrelated, but can't get other parts of the system to participate in working towards change and health. So that's really interesting that you say that. And it actually also just occurred to me, and you tell me, Simona, am I getting this right?
Mhm.
We're not just helping the therapist to think systemically, like in EFT. We're actually helping our clients to see the system and their parts within the system, which can create more empathy and turn on the caregiving system, basically.
Absolutely. Actually, this is our goal that they can hear each other if they go out from who is guilty and why. It's about hearing it. You can hear each other like, oh, so your intention is not that what I thought, right? They are not threatening each other. If we think about the attachment mechanism, if we think about systems, we always think about the symptom. The patient, the client with the symptom is
Mm,
normally pushed in the therapy with, the thing, fix it, fix him, fix her, she
mm,
started to drink, she doesn't go to school or whatever. But actually, when we put it in the system and we understand when this symptom, let's say, happened, we see that makes a lot of sense. And actually, the symptom has a lot of sense because a system wants always stability and tends the system to keep the same way of functioning. This is a
homeostasis.
exactly, yeah. So this is, normal for the system. But normal for the life is change. If we are very sure about something in life, is that it will change.
Well, sometimes homeostasis in a system is part of the problem, is that we've settled and gotten comfortable with something that's not healthy. And
Exactly.
also, can you talk about changing that system, how we need to shift from one kind of homeostasis to get to another, and what does that cause in the process?
Yeah, so I would say again, I like to, highlight this for my families that change is there, it's a promise. Something will change in a system,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just change is not pleasant, even if could be pleasant, where we see that maybe it's something that I wanted brings a lot of anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
brings a lot of unknown effort to adjust, to adapt to something. And many, many times in systems, what we see as a block or when they come in therapy, it's, the cause is that they didn't change, they cannot adjust to a new change, or they just didn't adjust before in another life event, right? Because we have like we have different stages of a life, cycles of a life family, and some families are stuck, for instance, in family with small children. But the children are, now they are not small anymore, they are teenagers, but they are just stuck. They had problems there. The parents couldn't, take care properly of the children or have authority. So they are still stuck there and they come when they are teenagers. Of course, they don't have authority, they continue not to have. And this we identify as a problem of, they couldn't adjust to a new life cycle of the family, right? Or it comes from outside challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and the family couldn't adjust, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then one part of the family or one element of the system starts to have a symptom. Suddenly the symptom is the problem. They come in the therapy with
Mm-hmm.
the hope many, many times that we as therapists we will know to fix the symptom.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
we
but
see this even with
we don't
couples
do
and
that.
individuals. Like you said, people see the symptom, well, they see the behavior or the emotion and identify that as the problem or the person versus their emotion or their behavior is a symptom communicating about the problem.
Yeah.
And also, I love what you said is that change is really uncomfortable. And I think even for families or couples or individuals that come together and are enlisted together through our work, okay, we're going to work together to change the system now. It's still, you're moving from one comfort zone to build something new, which destabilizes the old system. And so that can lead to that feeling of chaos, or, I tell couples sometimes it feels worse before it feels better because you're trying not to do the old thing that you guys used to do and you're trying to change it, but you haven't quite gotten to that new place where it feels stable. And
Mm.
a good old fashioned American pun I say is, this is how the sausage is made. It's ugly in the process, but you have a nice, beautiful product on the other end.
Right. Yeah. I like very much to ask, because yes, I like to put out the word symptom or problem and who,
Mhm.
but of course, when the family, for instance, comes, the first thing they say, this is the problem. And normally this means a person, right, is the problem. But then, as we said, if we think there are more elements in a system and they are very linked, intertwined, I like very much to ask, what do you think about this? Each of the members, and it's very pleasant, fun to work when they are. I don't work in all the session with small children, but for instance, one family session, I bring all the elements, meaning members, and sometimes they are very small children, like 3, 4, and you're thinking, or family says, don't ask him because he has nothing to say. He's too small. And he will reflect the system very good, actually, because I'm saying what do you think about this problem? How do you see it? And suddenly is, very enlightening and such a fresh eye and really reflects the system, right? Like a small, non-filtered opinion. So this is another thing in the systemic thinking. All the elements have the same importance. We need to ask. We need to see how this problem, let's say,
Mhm.
is seen by each and how each of the members is impacted by the problem,
Mhm.
right? And when they are all there and they hear, suddenly they find out very new things that will change the system, right? I
Mhm.
uh, I remember a family and like a teenager saying that I know what's going on between you guys that you want to divorce. I know that the parents came to me to first and they said they are very nice and civilized. Children don't know, right?
Mhm.
And they were like shocked, but suddenly their view, they said like, oh, so all this time, actually, you try to protect us. So all this time you tried kind of to create, you know, some attention, some movement that we were very busy together. So
Mhm.
it's very powerful the system, right? When the all the system comes in the office, even if sometimes it's scary to have all
Yeah.
the system, right? It's very powerful and intense.
Yeah. I'm thinking this is really important too, and I'm thinking even in terms of like couples therapy and individual therapy, because I think therapists might be more open and able to recognize the system in family therapy. But when it comes to couples or individuals, you know, I'm thinking there might be some setbacks there. And so I'm sort of what comes to mind too is, when a couple presents and maybe one partner is saying, well, my spouse is just depressed. If they would just stop being depressed, then everything would be fine. And again, like we're not seeing, there's a context, a system in which that depression is a part. And by the way, I've never had a client in my entire clinical career that was depressed and had absolutely no reason and no context in which that depression existed. And sometimes there is a healthy system in place that our clients, maybe because of their family of origin system, were never taught to bring their internal experience outside of their inner self and allow that to be a part of the system, even though the way they exist in the relationship and behave outwardly contributes to the system. There's a piece of that system that's sort of being held back. And when we help them bring it more forward in the relationship, we can also harness the power of the system for healing to occur. And then that leads me to the context of individual therapy, where I can hear therapists thinking, oh, but what if my single client doesn't have a spouse and they're not in a relationship and their family is totally toxic and, they don't have anyone they can turn to for therapy or for caregiving? And how would you maybe speak to that, Simona?
I mean, if we think just in IFIT, actually, we bring the system in the room because we have these imaginary encounters, like we see even in individual. And I agree with you. I say even in individual, even if no, that's the same. Because our sometimes our brain goes to he or she is alone, nothing there, so we can't relay or link with anything,
Mm-hmm.
outside. But in the individual, in our work, actually, we always bring the system, right? We do attachment history, and then is alive. The caregiving system, even if it was like 40 years ago, is so alive, right? We see our client through the eyes of the client, we see him or her in like a small child, and all the, principles, values, all the attachment, all the pain, and how the system went around our client, right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, we have for sure, it's in a system of work, in a group of friends.
Mhm.
As well, I didn't meet any client that is not in any system. As
Right.
isolated as the client says he or she is, actually, we find out that
Mhm.
is as well influenced by a system. It's the big
Yeah.
system, which is society, right? Even
Yeah.
society is a system, right?
Yeah, so wait, you're saying something really cool here, Simona. Is that it sounds like you're saying even if a client comes in and they're feeling isolated from their caregiving systems, feeling like those aren't available, we're still recognizing that their feeling of isolation is another symptom or outcome of their system at large. And so we want to really step into that with them and understand how is it out of your family, your friends, society, a billion people on this planet that you end up feeling totally isolated and alone with nobody to turn to. I mean, that's a big problem in and of itself. And I see
Yeah.
a lot of therapists will try to, well, if there's no healing system available, we'll just try to teach the client to heal themselves from the inside out, to give them this love. And, it just isn't effective because we're not designed for that. And our
Right.
sense of isolation that led us here didn't happen in isolation. And so learning to, you know, love ourselves when we feel unloved and excluded by others isn't really going to be very effective long term. So it's like isolating someone and just trying to treat the system and hopefully it stays stable, but it doesn't really stay stable if you don't treat the cause. And maybe part of the treatment is helping the client to form a new system with healthy parts. But definitely, we want to figure out how did this person come to feel isolated from all their systems, that there's nobody to turn to in a world full of people. Not all of them are dangerous. Yeah, they probably do have some toxic people around them, but not everybody on the planet is toxic.
Exactly. And this is the wisdom, I would say, of EFT, right? Because as you said, if we treat the client as just a lone individual that has nothing to go to, nobody to go to, we will create something that is not natural, kind
Mhm.
of be a self-resource forever. We can self-resource,
Mhm.
sometimes we can self-regulate, but we need to have mostly
Mhm.
healthier regulation systems, which is go to somebody, right? So
Right. We weren't
the
designed for that long term. Those were meant to be
no,
temporary strategies. And long term, even self regulation is sort of like co regulation when you're by yourself. Like, just a
yeah,
quick example is I have some first responders that after a really tough call, they start to imagine their wife, their baby holding them. And so they're actually co regulating, even though they're by themselves and they're kind of self soothing. So it's both. And
yeah.
EFIT, so Simona keeps saying EFIT. That's for those who don't know, that's emotionally focused therapy for individuals.
Yes, and this is great. It's finally something that puts the individual in the system and in the natural way, a human way that is relational. We can grow and heal in relations. So
The context.
these imaginary encounters that we do in EFIT, right? Meaning we invite in an imaginary way real
Mhm.
people, but not they don't come physically in an imaginary way, and we have a conversation that,
Mhm.
of course, will change the relation and the system. This is great for me, right? Because it keeps it systemic, it
Mhm.
keeps it relational, but in a way that allows that sometimes people come in individual sessions. They don't have
Mhm.
caregivers, parents, but we keep it real and natural, meaning you are alone, but I will invite your system in the office, right, on your couch in an imaginary way, but you can do it in a healthy way. So you will talk, we will relate, you will be able to get vulnerable and to to get responses because
Mhm.
that's the only way.
Mhm. And I'm sort of thinking for therapists who might ask, well, so does that mean that we can't work with one person and that their individual change could change the whole system? And I don't think we're saying that necessarily. I think it kind of depends on the system, again, in the context. And there could be multiple contexts. If, one person in high distress and their distress is a symptom of the system, and we're not treating the system, then yeah, can they be doing some changes that can affect the system? Yes. Does that mean the whole system will change to a new homeostasis that's healthy and happy and comfortable? Not necessarily. And I think it kind of depends on what kind of change people are going for. Sometimes we help people change, and in the context, their system needs to change with them, but because they're not customers for change and they're not coming for therapy, or they're not an open system that's open to influence, then that can cause new friction because one person might have outgrown the system, or it's just a new kind of distress where the system needed to grow with them and didn't. Or you may have a system that's growing and this individual part is struggling to grow with the system as needed. So there's lots of context in this. But
Yes.
in general, pulling somebody out of the system, even if you're working with them and hoping if I just treat the sniffles, will it make the cold go away? Isn't necessarily, the
Yeah.
context.
Yes, but it's true, and but we have hope, right? Because even a person comes in individual sessions, but we bring the system in, even if it's imaginary,
Mhm.
this for sure will impact the system in a way.
Mhm.
Because another law of the system is that any element makes a move, actually, even if the element wants to freeze and not makes a move, like a
Mhm.
parent that doesn't want that the
Mhm.
children go away, still the
Mhm.
system will change. Why? Because I'm frozen, so
Mhm.
the other elements needs to do something. So this individual session will bring something new in the system for sure. Of
Mhm.
course, always I just had a training with EFT, and the question was, what about if the real mother doesn't change? Right? Because the imaginary mother in the therapy may be changed. So I'm saying that's okay because the client changed,
Mhm.
the way that feels and the ability to tolerate, pain or frustration changed. It expanded. It got more flexible. So for sure, when we'll go and talk with the real mother, maybe she didn't change, but the
Mhm.
other element changed. So the discussion will be different for sure, right? So
True.
there's hope. Yes, we'll
That's
and
really good.
yeah.
That's a good point and a good example. I like how you said, and even in couples, like if we're helping one person change, but maybe the parent or the spouse doesn't want to change, there's still some change that will happen because the person we're working with is changing and they're going to start communicating differently and doing some things differently, which will still change the nature of some of the interactions. Will it be enough to cause a radical change or enough change in the system to where that client's going to be happy? We don't know. But
Mhm.
also, I think another thing that you're kind of saying is if the client is changing and the system is not, the client may now be in a more, because their inner system is starting to change also, they may feel more empowered and in a healthy place to make decisions about the system that they're in a way
Yeah,
that they couldn't make before.
exactly. And I will tolerate this mother that is still critical and not loving. I will tolerate it in a new way. I remember, my new space where I can tolerate. I remember that I'm worth it. I can see my mother that she can't do it, and I can have more compassion. So anyway, the relationship changed,
Mm-hmm.
and I will not be maybe overwhelmed so much because sometimes from this heated
Right.
discussion you can be overwhelmed, but when you are in another place, you just can tolerate, like, okay, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe
Yeah.
this is my family. Yeah, and I'm sorry, but I will not be, put down by these interactions anymore. Right? And
Yeah.
change, I would say. It's a good,
Yeah, that's beautiful, Simona. So I love that example. And you're kind of saying, in that space where they're able to grow their tolerance. And it doesn't mean saying that whatever's happening to them is okay if they're being criticized, or that tolerance isn't about putting up with hurtful behavior. It's about being able to tolerate the emotional distress inside so we don't shut down immediately and pull away and not make any change, or get overreactive and impulsively make wrong change. It gives us a space inside where we can go to and find a sense of stability and then choose what we want to do in that moment. If it's, hey, I'm not going to tolerate being put down in these interactions, which could be the change. Maybe in the past, if mom got critical, I would shut down and feel bad about myself on the inside and never say to mom, hey, that's really hurtful. I don't want to be put down, and that's really powerful. It's like helping people find their voice and be an agent for change, whether it's setting a boundary, I don't want to be put down, or being able to ask for the love and the care that they want and need and actually be able to receive it now because they're asking for it.
yeah, yeah,
That's pretty cool, Simona. This is really great. So I love, just a quick recap. We covered how systems, it's really like the context in which there's multiple parts that influence each other and are influenced by each other. So whether we're seeing a family, an individual, or a couple, and people come in, what people will describe as the problems are often symptoms of the problems, and we want to see those in context of the system, whether it's the emotion, the behavior. We recognize that it's not linear cause and effect, that even somebody's emotion was triggered by something else that came before that. So we may be trying to track the system backwards and forwards to find what's going on. It could be something from outside of the system, or an old part of an old system that's never healed, that's becoming a part of a new system. There's just so many parts. And by seeing the system, really it's like context. I think it's so much less pathological and can be so much more freeing for the people we work with. Instead of condemning them for feeling angry, we're going to try to recognize, hey, something might be happening that caused you the anger. I mean, maybe the way that you're expressing it isn't effective or healthy part of the system, but hey, there's some legitimate pain. We want to find out what happened before that. So again, we can help you guys change the system. This is
right.
brilliant.
And I think gives us, for us therapists, an overview. So not to look, sometimes we want to look close, but
Hmm.
not to look just to a person as a problem, but
Hmm.
to see, I want to see the dynamics. Something is going on here
Hmm.
between you two, and I will help you kind of to communicate,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
see the boundaries, to see the worries, not looking just to the problem. It gives us, a step back and we see the dynamic. So I like very much systemic thinking, of
Hmm.
course, combined with the attachments that I love. So it's
Yeah,
efficient.
it's beautiful. Now, do you teach a workshop on this, or if folks are listening to this and they maybe want to do therapy with you, or maybe they want you to be their supervisor or attend a, EFT training. Like, where can they find you?
Yes, actually, I'm teaching a lot of EFFT, and I teach in a systemic school. It's actually the only systemic and EFT school in Romania. So
Nice.
it's so they could find me on eftromania.ro, or as a email, it's simona.herb@yahoo.com if they want to kind of contact me. And they can see all as well on the Facebook page, Simona Herb EFT. So they can see all the activities and all the cool workshops. Yeah, we are doing a lot here in Romania, but
Mhm.
as well in other countries. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, Simona's last name is Herb, like a herb garden. So
Herb Garden, yes.
that's That's how you find her. And I'll make sure if you're watching this video on YouTube that I put the link to her website and her email in the description for the video. And you can catch her on social media. And like I said, I'm here in the US and she was my EFT supervisor that helped me get my supervisor certification. So she can definitely work across countries and oceans. And she's just really amazing and wonderful. So we're just so blessed to have your wisdom today, Simona. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all the people that take time, to heal.
And thank you guys for just watching this channel and sending me your ideas and giving me your feedback. And just the support has been beautiful and overwhelming. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. And I just thank you all. So, and speaking of which, make sure, guys, if you haven't done it yet, that you hit subscribe because more videos are on the way. Don't forget to buy my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients for Helping Professionals. Available on Amazon or on my website, www.drbugatti.com.